are two separate issues. The first is that there's unfortunately been a lot of articles written recently, mostly by non-physicians and non-scientists, saying, Americans have been told to eat less fat, they're eating less fat, they're fatter than ever, so, low fat has failed, bring out the bacon and eggs. Well, I went to the U.S. Department of Agriculture database and said, I know that Americans have been told to eat less fat, but what have we actually been eating? Well, it turns out that every decade since 1950, we've been eating more fat, more meat, more sugar, and more calories. So, not surprisingly, we're fatter. Not because we're eating too little of these things, but because we're eating too much of everything. Now, at the same time, what we're finding is that there's no point in giving up something that you enjoy unless you get something back that's better and quickly. And because these underlying biological mechanisms are so dynamic, when you make big enough changes in your diet and lifestyle, to the degree that you make them, most people find that they feel so much better so quickly. It reframes the reason for making these changes from fear of dying or fear of something bad happening, like a heart attack or stroke, which is not sustainable, to joy of living, which is. For 6 weeks or so after someone's had a heart attack, they'll do pretty much anything that their doctor or nurse tells them because they're afraid. But then the denial comes back. Sometimes when I lecture, I'll say, what's the mortality rate in this room? And I'll say, I don't know, it's 100%, it's one per person. We're all gonna die, but is that something we think about most of the time? Usually not, because it's too scary. So I've just found that efforts to try to motivate people that are fear-based work great for 4 to 6 weeks, but they don't work in the long run. What works is joy and pleasure and freedom and love. And if you have those 4 things, if you're freely choosing to make these changes, if you have a sense of love and support while you're doing this, if you can make it fun, and if you feel better, then you say, well, when I do this, I feel good. When I do that, I don't feel so good. So maybe I'll do more of this and less of that. And then it comes out of your own experience, not because some doctor or some book or whatever told you. Now, the other aspect is that it's not enough to just give people information and expect them to change. If it were, nobody would smoke. It's not like I tell a patient, hey, I want you to quit smoking, it's bad for you. They go, oh, I didn't know that. Everybody who smokes knows it's on every pack of cigarettes. So clearly, if information were enough, then nobody would be smoking, but lots of people still are. So I'd ask people, I'd say, why do you smoke? Or why do you overeat or drink too much or work too hard or abuse yourself in different ways? These behaviors seem so maladaptive to me. And they'd say, you don't get it. You really don't have a clue. These behaviors aren't maladaptive, they're very adaptive because they help us get through the day. They help us deal with our pain, our loneliness, our depression, our isolation. The real epidemic in our culture isn't just heart disease. It's loneliness and depression and isolation with the breakdown of the social networks that used to give people a sense of connection and community. Many people don't have a job that feels secure that they've been at for 20 or 30 years. They don't have 50 years ago, people had 2 or 3 generations of people they grew up with. They knew you, they saw you. They didn't just know your good stuff. They knew where you messed up, and you knew that they knew, and they knew that you knew that they knew, and they're still there for you. There's something really powerful about just being authentic and being seen in that way. But many people have nowhere that feels safe enough to really let down their emotional defenses and open up and be who they are, and no one that they can trust enough to do that. And so part of what we've learned is that the support groups in our study are not just helping people stay on the diet, for example. It's creating a safe environment that enables people to really connect with each other at a deep level, to let down their emotional defenses, to really be intimate and supporting each other in that way. Even the word heal comes from the root to make whole. Yoga from the Sanskrit, to yoke, to unite, to bring together. These are very old ideas that we're rediscovering. Someone can say, oh, I may look like the perfect parent, but my kid's on heroin, or my kid's got this problem. And instead of someone else saying, oh, well, why don't you send them to a drug rehab program, like they hadn't thought of that, to say, gosh, that must be really awful, to focus on what they're feeling, to say, gosh, my kid's got another problem, or they might say, I might used to have a drug problem, or whatever it happens to be. And suddenly, it doesn't fix the problem the kid's having, but it fixes the sense of isolation and shame and often humiliation that goes along with it, which really are toxic emotions. And to be able to just be authentic in a trusting environment, you can only be intimate to the degree that you can open up and be emotionally vulnerable. And you can only do that when you feel safe. So the paradox is that the sense of commitment that people make to each other into that process enables people to connect at such a deep level that that's really an important part of the healing process. It's as important as what we eat or exercising or even quitting smoking. Study after study have shown that people who are lonely and depressed are 3 to 10 times more likely to get sick and die prematurely than those who have that sense of love and connection and community.